So when the RTX 3080 and 3090 were revealed, many people noticed that there was a huge gap in not only the amount of shaders between these two GPUs, but the memory capacity as well, and that got a lot of people wondering, is there going to be an RTX 3080 Ti or 3080 20GB? Well, let's talk about it. Before that, this video is brought to you by Raid Shadow Legends, a visually inspired, actually fun mobile game with hundreds of hours worth of content. Raid Shadow Legends is a free turn-based role-playing game with battle arenas, dungeon runs, clan boss fights, and a fully voiced story campaign. Now I'm going to open up a few shards, which are a way to collect unique champions to add to your team. The thing I like about Raid is that there are many different kinds of cool looking characters to collect, and they all have different stats. Here you can see that I got a human with decent stats, but I also got a basilisk with really high HP, attack, and defense, as well as a dwarf with higher HP than usual, and they can all be upgraded or sacrificed. Raid just released a huge champion update, rebalancing over 20 different champions for PvP, and on top of that, the Forge is now available so you can craft high quality artifacts. If you're interested in playing an actually fun mobile game, be sure to use the link in the description quick, because every new player gets an exclusive welcome pack containing 100,000 silver, 1 energy refill, 10 mystery shards, and a free champion slasher, which of course you can find here in your inbox for the next 30 days only. So in order to figure out whether or not a 3080 Ti or 20GB 3080 are even going to exist, well, first let's go ahead and take a look at the leaks that have popped up over the last couple of months. Then we'll talk about the possible specs and release date of these GPUs. And then finally, I'll give my opinion on whether or not you should actually be expecting these cards to exist, or if it's all just a bunch of fluff on the internet. So if we go ahead and take a look at those leaks, starting with some of the oldest information I could find, well, I think a lot of the conversation around the RTX 3080 20GB version started with this tweet back from June 22nd that was posted by Kopite7Kimi over on Twitter, where he leaked a lot of the Ampere GPUs pretty accurately before they even launched. And if you notice, one of the GPUs says SKU20 and says I don't know. Now later on August 17th, he clarified by stating this: PG132-SKU20 is RTX 3080 20G from AIC. Now the next piece of information I could find was posted by VideoCards over on their website videocards.com in July, where they shared a picture of what was supposedly at the time an aftermarket version of the RTX 3080 Ti. Now as we all know, that Strix model did turn out to be the model that we see on the 3080 and 3090 for the cooler, but it could be that at that time Nvidia shared with them that there was going to be a 3080 Ti, or plans were scrapped, or maybe they just didn't even know and they were guessing there was going to be a 3080 Ti. But it does get you starting to wonder, were there plans for a 3080 Ti, and is it still coming? Now the next piece of information that I could find was posted again by VideoCards on their website in August, where they stated, quote, "According to our sources, Nvidia is set to launch 3 SKUs in September: the RTX 3090 24GB, RTX 3080 10GB, and RTX 3070 8GB. We have learned that board partners are also preparing a second variant of the RTX 3080 featuring twice the memory, 20GB. However, that model is yet to be announced, and it might launch later." So that further backs up the idea that yes, there is a plan for some sort of upgraded RTX 3080 model. Whether or not they're going to call it the 3080 Ti, 3080 Super, or just 3080 20GB is something we just don't know yet. But there's one more piece of information I want to share with you before discussing the possible specs of this card. And this information came just yesterday from VideoCards once again over on Twitter, where they responded to someone who said, so when Nvidia is talking about a GeForce RTX 3080 10GB Founders Edition, does that mean there will be a 20GB variant? And they responded to that comment by saying yes, planned after the RTX 3060 Ti and Big Navi. And you know, those graphics cards are coming out pretty soon. In fact, we're expecting the 3060 Ti to land in the second half of October, I believe, and then Big Navi should be landing shortly after that. So if there is a 3080 20GB model coming, it probably isn't too far off. Now, before I give my thoughts on whether or not I believe this card does actually exist, let's go ahead and talk about what the specs of this card could possibly be. So if we take a look at the RTX 3080 and compare it to the 3090, well, the 3080 has around 8,704 shaders, or what they like to call CUDA cores, and the RTX 3090 has, I believe, just over 10,000 CUDA cores. So there's a pretty huge gap there. And so if they were going to increase the CUDA core count, I would expect them to add probably close to 1,000 shaders. So you could probably see something with like 9,728 shaders, I believe, you know, give or take a little bit, but I wouldn't be surprised if you saw something around there because, let's be honest, they're probably not going to want to give you something with as many CUDA cores as the RTX 3090, even if they do decide to give you more, because that GPU is pretty close to the full die, and it's hard to yield big GPUs like that, so they're not going to want to sell you something like that for really under $1,000, because Nvidia's a big company and they need to make a lot of profit off of every single sale, and apparently Samsung 8N, which is what these cards are being manufactured on, isn't yielding super great right now. At least that's the current rumors going around the internet. And you know what? That brings me to the memory side. And so here, there's an even bigger gap. We have 10 gigabytes on the RTX 3080 and 24 gigabytes on the RTX 3090. Now, if they do decide to go with a 20 gigabyte RTX 3080, they could just give you the exact same amount of shaders and just slap another 10 gigabytes on the back of the chip, because I believe right now GDDR6X is not available in, I believe, 16 gigabit capacities, which means you can't get 2 gigabyte chips, which means you can't just put 10 2 gigabyte chips on the bottom of the RTX 3080. If they had the ability to put 2 gigabyte chips on the card, they would have done it with the 3090, but instead they decided to put 12 1 gigabyte chips on the bottom and 12 1 gigabyte chips on the top. So if they do decide to go for 20 gigabytes, they're going to have to put 10 on the bottom and 10 on the top. And I'm not 100% sure if they would want to do that, but it's something that they definitely could do, as again, they already did something similar with the RTX 3090. So if they do the 20 gigabyte version, my guess is they probably won't give you many more shaders, but they could. So I would expect basically the RTX 3080 with the exact same amount of shaders, but double the memory. Now, if they decide to brand it as the RTX 3080 Ti, which I believe the only reason why they would do that is if AMD really pushed them by releasing a really, really fast graphics card that was competing with the 3080. If they had that pressure, they probably would release something like the 3080 Ti with quite a bit more shaders. And in that case, yes, they could go with 20 gigabytes, but I think it would make more sense for them to release a 3080 Ti with 12 gigabytes just on the bottom, because that way you can release a card that gets really close in terms of performance to the RTX 3090, but it has exactly half the VRAM, so those people who are really obsessing over more VRAM, or maybe you just need it and it's not for a game, you actually need it for some sort of workload, you're still going to buy the 3090, because remember, if they're going to sell you a video card for $1,000 or less that's significantly faster than the RTX 3080 or has significantly more memory, they have to do it in a way that doesn't eat into their RTX 3090 sales too much. Now, moving on to the release date, and I touched on this earlier, but again, if the 3060 Ti is releasing in late October, and if Big Navi is probably releasing late October or maybe even in November, well then I would expect a release date sometime between November and December for the 3080 20 gigabyte, or if they want to brand it the 3080 Ti, we'll just have to wait and see not only if this card comes out, or if it does, what they're going to call it. And talking about if this card's going to come out, let me give my final thoughts on whether or not I believe it does truly exist. So personally, yeah, I do believe that the RTX 3080 20 gigabyte or RTX 3080 Ti does exist in some form at Nvidia's factories somewhere, or at least in somewhat of a blueprint, because you got to remember that Nvidia tends to think 2 steps ahead of AMD. That hasn't always been the case, but recently they've been really doing some 3D chess type of moves against AMD and just having cards waiting. And with that huge gap between the 3080 and 3090, it just makes way too much sense. You got all these leaks that are saying very similar stuff. It's just kind of starting to all add up to where I believe that, yeah, this card probably does exist, but here's the caveat. It will only exist if AMD pushes it into existing. So if AMD comes out with a card that can only match the 3070, it doesn't even beat it, not even by like 5%, then there is no incentive for Nvidia in all reality to give you a 3080 Ti. They'd rather take those people who aren't satisfied with the 10 gigabyte RTX 3080 and basically force you to pay more than twice as much to get the 3090, which in all reality is probably only going to get you another 15% performance. But if you want that extra VRAM, they're going to make you pay for it. They're not going to just release a 3080 Ti for no reason. I mean, they could, and they have done similar stuff in the past, but my guess is if AMD doesn't come out with something strong, they're not going to release it. But the fact that Nvidia has, priced their RTX 3080 at $700, it's a GA102 die, and it's extremely fast, I'm guessing that they are planning on AMD releasing something that gets at least somewhat close. I'm guessing we'll probably see a card from AMD that's at least 15% faster than the RTX 3070. Who knows, that might not be the case, and they might even have something that beats the 3080, but that's something we just don't know about right now. And clearly, Nvidia is a little bit worried about AMD because, again, otherwise they wouldn't be pricing their cards as they are, and they wouldn't have left so much room for them to maneuver in case AMD does have something serious. But hey, that's just what I think. What do you think about the 3080 20GB / 3080 Ti? Do you think it exists, or do you think that it's all just a bunch of rumors that'll never come true? I'd love to see what you have to say in the comments below, and of course, I'll see you in the next video. If you made it to the end of the video, be sure to drop a like. Every time you do so, Nvidia and Intel drop prices. Also, if you want to see more, click here. You won't be disappointed.